Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the IMBA Europe 2020 Summit, an unusual summit in its virtual format, but with an opportunity for us to meet, if virtually, and a style I think we've all got used to now, and indeed to share some thoughts on how the potential of this sport, activity, leisure, tourism creature called mountain biking could recover during the post-COVID period, how it can seed, how it can thrive, how we can learn from this kind of whole recovery process. My name is Kevin Main. I'm the Chief Executive of Cycling Industries Europe, who represents the cycling business sector at the European level and the many different companies. I've been around the cycling scene professionally for about 20 years in various forms of lobbying, but I've been around riding mountain bikes for possibly the first generation, which probably makes me a sort of an old guy in this room from riding mountain bikes during that period. Really, I just say from a point of view why the bike industry is here, not just because I'm an IMBA Europe board member, but I think mountain biking has long been a subject of much passion for the people that do it. But from a business point of view, and particularly the cycling industry, it's at times almost taken for granted that we've got this great component of the bike world. But what's extraordinary is that at time we forget the excitement of the generation when mountain bikes came on the scene and became a big part of cycling. And equally, when mountain biking is under threat, it comes as a big surprise because there may be challenges. And I think COVID has really highlighted that, how much we miss this thing when it's not available to us, and how important it is economically, touristically, health, well-being, mental health, that we can kind of ride our bikes in the countryside, both close to home and at the tourism destinations we love. So the conception of this seminar, this summit, this webinar was to share, but it is also, I think, to give the many people attending something of a toolkit, because if we could have picked a dream team of kind of panelists, we would have picked the group we have today. And I'm delighted to thank them all for coming and speaking, both keynotes and panelists, to give anybody in the mountain bike sector things you can use as part of your recovery. A tourism reason, a physical activity reason, an economic reason, an operational reason, a business reason that you can use in your arguments to put mountain biking at the front of the storytelling where you are. So I very much hope today that you see this as a toolkit. Practically, we're going to do keynote speeches very shortly. You will have the chance to put in questions. There is a Q&A function, which you will find at the bottom of your screen. And once the keynote speakers have spoken, I will ask them a few questions, but I will be getting your questions given to me, and we'll take as many as we can up until around about 4 o'clock. And then at 4 o'clock, we will switch to a panel, a great group of contacts, friends of IMBA, who want to debate around some of those topics some more. But quickly, that is your session. That's a discussion session. It's a prompt. There's not a sort of structure of speeches. And again, the Q&A function is your resource to send us your questions. And as vigorously as you can use that, the better. And frankly, the easier my job gets and the more exciting it is for our contributors to hear from you. I should say for the record that this is being recorded. So the speakers know we may be able to use this material. If for some reason your internet falls over and you struggle to get this content, then I hope through IMBA Europe we will make video recordings, and equally we'll make some content available. So if the speakers refers to anything that's a useful resource, we'll try and make it available to you in the coming days and in next week after the event, because this is very much the kickoff of our mountain bike recovery program here in IMBA Europe. So that's enough from me. I said we have some fantastic people to be here, and it's my enormous pleasure to start with a round of leaders and opinion formers in their sector who will bring us some kind of diversity in answers. Teodora Marinska from the European Travel Commission is going to bring their expertise and understanding at the European level about how the tourism sector is reacting to COVID, could come back from COVID, and what is the policy framework for a safe recovery in the tourism sector. Then our president, the president of IMBA Europe, Thomas Larsen Schmidt, who is an expert in outdoor sports. He's worked in the sector, both in cycling, but also in the wider Danish Outdoor Council, and is looking at but as president of IMBA Europe, I think he wants to set the tone on how mountain biking is gonna come through this process. Alongside the first two, Gergana Nikolova is from the Adventure Travel and Trade Association. Clearly, adventure travel, trade, it's a kind of pillar of a sector of our industry. It's a pillar of how people like us move and travel and take holidays. And her association is looking at life after COVID for adventure travel. And I'm sure Lee Cragie is known to many of particularly the mountain bike enthusiasts on the call, but Lee Cragie is now the Active Nation Commissioner for Scotland, where she promotes health and well-being at the national level on behalf of the Scottish government. But she's also a founder of the Adventure Syndicate and a well-known kind of figure in mountain biking as a former pro rider and kind of, I suppose, member of our community. And so I'm very glad to have all four of them here. I think they will kind of speak for themselves. So it's my pleasure to invite Teodora to kick us off with a keynote. And as I say, don't forget, if you've got questions for Teodora, put them in the Q&A, and I will be gathering them up with the team for the end of the discussions. So Teodora, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Kevin. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. It's a real pleasure to be here with you today, virtually, but still here, and speak a bit about the near future for tourism and adventure experiences in Europe. Maybe I should start by briefly introducing the European Travel Commission. We are an organization made up national tourism organizations. So we are deeply rooted in all sorts of tourism experiences. We are based in Brussels. We work a lot with the European Commission, also on promotion of Europe as a tourism destination. And we are currently chairing the organization that unites all representatives of the tourism industry towards policymakers at European Union level, the European Tourism Manifesto. I would start today by reminding you about how devastating the impact of the current crisis has been on the European economy and specifically on tourism. The lockdown measures and the almost complete ban on travel has put tourism to a halt. It was virtually not happening in the last 3 months. And the consequences for the SMEs related to tourism, these family businesses, the seasonal workers, the travel agencies, airlines, the whole travel ecosystem have been and continue to be severe. To put it simply, there's no income coming and fixed costs are still there. So it's just a matter of time until money runs out and people go out of business. Now, this is even more serious if we consider that actually tourism is extremely important for employment in Europe. In the European Union, our sector employs more than 22 million people. That accounts for 11% of the total EU employment. And according to the latest estimations from the World Travel and Tourism Council, 14 million of these jobs are at risk. And the best case scenario, because this presumes that some travel in Europe will restart in the following weeks. In the worst case scenario, up to 30 million jobs could be lost. OECD calculates that worldwide, the international tourism economy might lose between 60 and 80% this year, again, depending on the duration of the crisis and the speed with which we manage to go back to something similar to normal, but not exactly. Tourism jobs are important also because tourism employs vulnerable groups. We're talking about, as I mentioned, seasonal workers, part-time workers, a lot of young employees. 13% of the tourism workforce is under 25 years old. So it's really door opener to the job market. And 58% of everybody working in tourism is actually female. So it's really essential to resume travel as soon as possible for its economic benefits. And it's very important to save the sector at this time. Keep it up, keep it afloat. Rough seas now, but maybe it's also an opportunity for a better future. When we talk about resuming travel, we don't talk about going back to what it used to be, because for the moment this is impossible, and it's probably going to be the case for the next year or more. We emphasize a lot to especially policymakers, specifically the European Commission, that we need a very harmonized approach. We are in this together at a European level, but also globally. Harmonization is a key. The removal of restrictions to travel and the border openings need to be harmonized. The protocols that would allow travel to restart would need to be accepted universally, or at least in Europe at EU level in all different member states. If not completely the same, they should be mutually recognized. And we also need a common effort in reinstalling confidence to travel in Europe. The European Commission and the national governments are already doing a lot to help tourism businesses, because it's maybe the hardest hit sector by the crisis at this moment. What we as an organization would like to see is a more centralized approach and having the European Union intervening with funds directly rather than channeling those through the different member states and regions. And the reason for this is that speed is key. It's really because we're dealing with small, medium enterprises, mostly actually micro enterprises and family businesses. We really need to get to them fast, because otherwise they don't have the capacity of staying afloat without any income for a longer time. There are a lot of measures in place. We have loans, grants, unemployment schemes. There are some things which are still missing from the big picture. There is a lot of consumer protection, which is really not adequate given current time. So much more is needed to be done for cash flow problems. I'm talking about having vouchers instead of refunds, for example. And we also need to work more on the harmonization of opening for travel, especially at EU level, because whatever protocol we want to adopt, and the protocols are actually already there. We have the European Commission published a month ago a list of guidelines how to resume operations in the hospitality, and also how to go back to normal connectivity, step-by-step restoration of transport services. WTTC has prepared, after a long working session with different governments around the world, protocols for all subsectors of tourism, hospitality, outdoor retail, aviation, including airports, cruise, tour operators, including convention centers and MICE tourism. The solutions are there. They're very much traveler focused. So they are not, they're trying to really take the experience into consideration. But they need to be adopted universally, and especially in Europe, because people are used in traveling into Schengen space, which is very, very seamless. There are no borders, and everything has been working pretty nicely until now. We didn't notice it, but now we do. This is currently not the case. Even in Europe, when we talk about reopening, and officially reopening of tourism started on Monday, the measures are not harmonized. There are some countries, for example, where they test you upon arrival, and countries that don't do that. There are countries that have a list of other European countries for whose nationals they require a quarantine of 14 days. So of course, this is not helping a lot to instigate people to travel or to make them feel confident about how much their experience will be worth it. And just to conclude, to focus a little bit on the positive side, with every crisis, there comes a lot of challenges, but also a lot of opportunities. And for European tourism, that would be the opportunity to restart in a better way, to restart in a more sustainable way. And I think this is where mountain biking and adventure travel in particular would play a very big role. We do a lot of research, and ETC publishes regularly a study called the Long Haul Travel Barometer, where we learn more about the motivations and barriers for travelers to come to Europe. Of course, the beginning of this year showed us that confidence is very low. Actually, Europe is closed for people who are not from here at the moment. But on the positive note, when thinking about visiting, overseas travelers are really focusing on lesser known destinations and a safe environment, and destinations that invest into protecting their nature and culture. And spending time in nature is going to be a big motivation, is on the top of the list of travelers as a reason to go to Europe. So we see even currently, this is a great idea to actually promote these activities. People may be in the dreaming rather than the planning stage, but such efforts would most probably pay off very well in the future. For the current summer season, we rely entirely on inter-European and domestic travel, regional travel, and it's more sustainable from a lot of points of view. Normally, European Travel Commission does promotion outside of Europe, but currently we are focusing on a special campaign that actually targets Europeans and tries to open their eyes into rediscovering the continent they live in. We will share a link with you of our current campaign. I think it will be very interesting because it focuses a lot on nature, outdoors, remote areas, the feeling of breathing and being in calm and in symphony with nature. I hope that you could also share it with your networks and stakeholders and audiences. I will cut it off now and happy to take any questions in the Q&A.
Thank you very much, Teodora. I have a strong suspicion there's a lot of those 22 million jobs and those small companies that need speed, knowing who's kind of on this call and who's in our sector. So kind of knowing that's there, and I think some of the resources you've mentioned and other things that go forward, I mean, we'll be delighted to share those, and I'm sure there'll be questions in the follow-up. So I really kind of appreciate that as a kickoff from the very highest kind of European level. To follow Teodora, I'm delighted to say my colleague and the president of IMBA Europe, Thomas Larsen Schmidt, is now going to give us an overview, very much from the mountain biking side of this conversation. So Thomas, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Kevin. It's definitely a pleasure to be here today. And I would like to thank everybody for attending. It's super great to have you here, and I'm convinced we'll have a great session today. We at IMBA Europe, of course, appreciate the challenge that COVID-19 has made in many of our communities through illness, job loss, closures, lockdown, and more. It's been really hard for many people. But like we just heard, we also need to look at the opportunities and new ways to go. And to return to the positive, we need to show some leadership and we need to be bold. We recognize the whole situation can lead us towards new opportunities and solutions. We know that bike sales are up. We know that a lot of people discovered how much they missed the outdoors when they were inside for a long time, when the weather was good outside. So we strongly suggest that we use the recovery to strengthen access, to use it to help disperse people so they can keep a distance but still be together. We strongly suggest that we benefit health and do that through trails close to home, guided tours and trails at tourist destinations. It's clear to us that all these ways to get people activated is needed, and that these three approaches support each other. IMBA Europe see the need to show a path or a trail towards recovery. A path where we do not necessarily go back to how things were before, but see maybe a new way forward in a more sustainable way. We know and believe that mountain biking and trails are the answer to many societal challenges. We will do our best to help all of you to move forward with us. trails close to home is a key that unlocks many problems. Trails close to home can increase fun, health, fitness. It can lift communities, can be a way to disperse crowds and give a lot more people the possibility to ride, have fun, and get healthy close to home. We believe that trails close to home will increase the number of mountain bikers altogether, grow the sport, and grow the numbers of riders longing to go mountain biking on their holiday at destinations with skilled guides. So what we see in front of us is a more sustainable way to grow the pie. Like we always say, no trails, no sales. And this goes for both trails close to home and trails at destinations. So I guess we can say that this whole COVID-19 situation is a game changer. That things will not be the same in any sector. We have now a choice. We can be passive and let other people set the agenda, or we can take charge of our own destiny and build a better way. So with IMBA Europe's vision, we can see that path in front of us. And our vision is to get more people on bikes through sustainable mountain biking. And we want to improve people's lives with better health. We want to improve climate and economics through mountain biking. We also want to advocate easy access and great sustainable mountain bike trails from the close to home rides to the iconic backcountry experience at destinations across Europe with skilled and professional guides. We want to work for Europe as a mountain bike friendly place. We want to grow the diversity of cycling and quality of mountain bike communities across Europe. Everyone in mountain biking is aware of voices that worry about mountain biking, tranquility, user conflict. But right now, some of the alternatives are much worse. If you compare mountain biking to cruise ships or coach parties, traffic jams, people wanting to go to the coast, then we have a unique and special opportunity to build mountain biking into the COVID recovery, and we must be bold and reach for our vision. There are really exciting things happening in cycling right now. We as mountain bikers may be a bit behind the timeline in the urban sector, but we are ahead of most of the tourism and sports sectors. It gives us a huge opportunity to learn from what has been done well by the rest of the cycling sector and be ahead of the game in the countryside and at the tourism recovery. It's not luck or accident that cycling is seen as a solution for COVID recovery in cities. It's because our colleagues and allies did a great job, both publicly and politically. And as a result, we have millions of new cyclists now, many on mountain bikes. What they experience this summer could decide if they remain mountain bike riders for life. So we need to give them a good, sustainable option out in nature. Things that we have to do is to solve problems. So the problems we can solve with mountain biking, as we see it, is right now we know that people have shown governments the need for public space and outdoor activity, the need for tourism that doesn't rely on congested hotspots and mass services like aviation and cruise ships. So we need people to return to rural areas and relaunch the economy. We need people to be able to take breaks and holiday in their own countries, and hopefully in time in the rest of Europe and visiting each other in our respective countries. So we strongly urge you all to have solutions ready, be prepared, and know what things will cost, and have drafts ready of law changes that needs to be made to make mountain biking into the potential it really has. So the solutions we need to have ready is greater trail capacity, and maybe even a temporary lift on access restrictions And it could be that those temporary lifts could become permanent lifts of access restrictions. We need trails close to home, extended to regional networks and trail sites. We need recovery money, budgeted proposals to support new trails, new centers, bike parks, mountain bike, e-mountain bike, hire facilities, guides, find emergency EU funds, understand the criteria. We need to promote to tourist boards, governments promoting mountain bike solution. We need to map and present places to ride for all abilities and all locations. And we also need to build alliances. People who have never thought of mountain biking before, but now with COVID-19 and when we start the recovery, they need us to help them, to make the right choices, to go to the right places, to ride their bikes. So people who could only see barriers before have a political and economic imperative to change. So work together and build alliances with the tourism industry, with the cycling industry, and with your local governments. So we recognize the challenges that the coronavirus pandemic has placed on the whole scene of mountain biking, but we have made our choice in IMBA Europe. We believe now is the time to build a better future for mountain biking. It's the right thing to do to enable people and places we care about to recover from this pandemic. We want to give people the choice and the possibility to choose an activity that sustains and supports health, the environment, and local economies. So come with us. We will show the whole of Europe that mountain biking is a united force of professionals, businesses, volunteers, riders, and allies who have a shared vision. Together, we will take a leading role in the coronavirus recovery, and we want to look back to today and be proud that when we were needed, the mountain biking community took the lead and supplied community and destinations and local communities with solutions. This will be the words from me, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thomas, thank you very much. Something made me smile in the middle of that when you said kind of unique and special. And I hope that's from the things you described that we could do, that we can keep that kind of unique and special character of what mountain biking can do in all those different circles that you described. So I think quite look forward to the debate and to the discussion in a moment as to how the other colleagues see that. Now, Gergana's going to join us, and you'll see her video in a moment. You'll see her screen. She's sitting in a beautiful garden and has trees behind her, which is making us all quite jealous. And but Gergana from the Adventure Travel Trade Association will take us through some of their thoughts on where we fit and where the adventure travel sector is going in this post-COVID period. Gergana, it's yours.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. And hello, everyone. I'll be turning my slides now. I am here in the Bulgarian mountains. I'm on my vacation. The internet is down, so I get to enjoy the nature and the mountain. I don't see mountain bikers, but hopefully they are there. I am part of the Adventure Travel Trade Association. Some of you might know it. I won't go into deep details who we are. I will be sharing the slides and you can look at them. So just a quick context, we are a mission-driven organization and we are representing the adventure travel community around the world. Our constituency is over 1,300 member organizations in 100 countries. To be on the same page, we mentioned a little bit earlier about the adventure travelers, but a brief description of what is adventure travel. Whereas in the past, adventure travel was understood to be a risky undertaking, these days travelers say their motivations for adventure travel are an expanded worldview, challenge, time in nature, learning, and so on. They're seeking mental and physical wellness, novel and unique experiences, and challenge, whether physical, cultural, and oftentimes transformational. And who is the adventure traveler? He or she, and this is pre-COVID. So he or she are a well-educated person with passion for travel and exploration, and about over 50% have disposable income, which often is invested in traveling. As any other traveler, the adventure traveler has changed due to the current crisis. So now during the next slides, we'll go a little bit more deeper into what has changed. Sorry. For the insights, we worked with the behavioral expert in travel, Gergana Nikolova, our own adventure travel community, and we used also ATTA's expertise. So how has changed the behavior? I will mention 3 elements, and then we'll go to the next pieces of my presentation. A major outcome of the current social distancing phenomena will be the desire to reconnect with close ones and compensate for the lost time. The desire to socialize with your close ones will be in conflict with the remaining fear from crowds. We expect that this will lead to a demand for experiences that are in small groups, allowing for interaction with close ones, rather than travels with large groups that involve contact with many different people. In that context, we think that the isolation and the anxiety from the current crisis will give rise to the demand for stress-relieving and rejuvenating experiences in nature. We feel and hope that this crisis will fuel new demand for the powerful and wellness benefits that nature offers, especially such that are shared with the close ones. So in that context, also as mentioned earlier, we expect that adventure travel will be on the rise in the coming years. So here are 3 possible effects that will likely be triggered from the desire to socialize, but preference to avoid crowds. First, there will be a growing demand for small group journeys and experiences that are shared with family members and friends. We expect that the fear from crowds will remain and will likely impact formats that involve interaction with larger groups. Second, as a result of the current dynamics, travelers will expect destinations and operators to take effective measures that avoid crowding, regardless of what that might cost. And third, we expect that there will be growing demand for off-the-beaten-path experiences that allow for socializing with close ones, but do not involve crowds. The second characteristic is focused on the value. Previous crises that have involved economic downturn have increased the demand for value in the market exchanges. So we suspect that this will be very distinct in our industry as well when it recovers. The pursuit for value is not the same as pursuit for low price. On the contrary, if the traveler or their families are not impacted by unemployment, they will still pursue higher end experiences and will be ready to pay an above average price tag. They will simply demand that the value they receive for the price they are paying is significant and obvious. This means that destinations and service providers need to ensure that their value proposition is clearly spelled out in all its dimensions. The traveler needs to feel that the benefits they're extracting from a travel experience, such as emotion, rejuvenation, status, and luxury, are cumulatively more valuable than the monetary price that they pay. So strong focus on value is likely to produce 2 effects. The first is that travelers will be looking for information and descriptions that reveal the value potential of any experience. How well values are communicated and the extent of which it is relevant to the traveler will determine how favorable the price tag is perceived. And second, this lower time is a fantastic time to ensure that the value of destination or company level offering is clearly communicated. Moving to the third likely characteristic of the post-COVID-19 traveler, what we expect is that attitude towards hygiene will be radically different after the crisis and will be perceived as non-negotiable. So anything from a food store like the one we see here to a museum and accommodation facility will be assessed through the prism of cleanliness. We have already seen airlines emphasizing on hygiene procedures in their communication at the start of the current crisis. The expectation is that most operators along the entire value chain will have to maintain different levels of cleanliness and, very important, demonstrate that. So what does that mean for the traveler behavior? First, as we are already seeing, the expectation of our clients will be that hygiene will be non-negotiable element of the service, the facility design, and the experience itself. Travelers will expect that operators are committed to new standards and that they will communicate about the actions they are taking in this direction. Second, we think that the new hygiene and protection culture will fuel popularity of new travel accessories, which can easily become souvenirs branded with destination brands or service provider logos. These can be protective masks, gloves, glasses, and others. And also this gives us some space for creativity too. And third, we already see, and also Teodora mentioned about the formalized guidelines and standards, including in hygiene and certification around this. So we spoke a little bit about the changing behavior. So let's take a look at what's going to come next and how the new normal, as mentioned before, that it is a new normal from here on, will change also the new realities. While COVID-19 has a dramatic impact on the revenues of tourism businesses, it also offers a unique opportunity to take the local experiential offering to the next level and be ready for the future as an alternative destination to the traditional global tourism hotspots. So while all of us are tempted to go back and operate as soon as possible and the same way as before, too many things will be different. So our new normal will require finding the balance between what worked before and the changes that are currently occurring. One of the tests for businesses, including in tourism and adventure tourism, will be the ability to sense the changes and adapt operations accordingly. So this means that now, when there is no or very slow business, we need to use the time for product adjustment and new product development. As indicated, the post-COVID-19 traveler will expect adjusted experience design to align with the new realities. So, for example, the fear from crowds will require that operators redesign their offerings to prevent the gathering of large groups of people at basically any cost. The COVID-19 crisis will not only change the behavior of the destination's traditional markets, but will require also attracting new market segments. So responding to the needs of new travelers will require adjustment of the existing product portfolios as well. And while we speak about product adjustment and adaptation, it is important to highlight that COVID-19 crisis did not eliminate all sustainability challenges that were challenging the growth of tourism. Recovery should be shaped with sustainability as non-negotiable principle that will ensure balanced growth, profitability, and preservation. And I'm very happy to hear earlier Teodora speaking about this on policy level and on European level. In addition to being the right thing, sustainability, it is expected by the traveler, and more specifically in today's context, the adventure traveler. Sustainability can be non-negotiable only if it is incorporated in the design of all offerings as basically non-negotiable principle for the destination. Destinations and local operators have the opportunity to set the rules and change the principles in ways that make sure that they can continue enjoying the benefits of tourism without sacrifices. And before I wrap up for today, we mentioned earlier the need for protocols, and we see already industry leaders and destinations working on these. So I'm using the opportunity to let you know that on June 23rd, ATTA will be releasing the health and safety guidelines for 3 adventure activities: trekking, biking, and rafting, and also one overarching guideline for the industry. As part of the guidelines will be also included a practical assessment to allow you to understand how to best address your business needs. more additional activities will be released also in July this year. And with this, I would like to thank you very much for the opportunity to be here with you and look forward to your questions at the end of the presentation.
Gergana, thank you very much. And can I thank your assistant, that lovely bird behind you that was singing its way and providing an alternative soundtrack. I was afraid we're going to lose half the panelists who were going to go and ride their bikes or something to be in the countryside, but you've kept them on the call by offering a kind of wildlife offer as well. But and I have to say, the hashtag social without crowding, if that could summarize kind of my own personal view about where next, I think that's a lovely thing that we may adopt, and we certainly should talk about during the rest of this process, because if that doesn't sum up many people's attitude to MTB, then I don't know what does. So some really interesting stuff there. Thank you very much. And yes, we'll definitely share your guidelines. Right, now to bring us to the last stage, coming at the mountain biking and the sport and physical activity and health from a different perspective in this physically active approach to the post-COVID period. I'm delighted to now welcome Lee Cragie from Scotland, the Active Nation Commissioner, to take the floor. Lee, it's yours.
Thank you very much, Kevin, and thanks very much for having me. I've sat here and listened with real interest to the other three keynote speakers. It's been really interesting to hear what's happening around the world and see just how it fits with quite a lot of the stuff that's happening in Scotland. I thought I'd start just with a little bit of background about my role as the Active Nation Commissioner in Scotland. It's an interesting role. I'm an independent commissioner to the Scottish Government, but interestingly, it's funded by Transport Scotland, and that should have probably been highlighted to me at the start. I didn't realise at the start of this that although my title is Active Nation Commissioner for Scotland, a lot of people confuse that with Active Travel Commissioner for Scotland, which is really interesting and comes with it a lot of challenges and a lot of opportunities. But the whole idea around this post was to encourage people to think about how they moved around, to encourage people to leave their cars behind for everyday short journeys and consider cycling and walking as a healthy, sustainable alternative. So that was the agenda from the Scottish Government, but they employed for this role not a civil servant or a policy maker, not somebody from the industry, not an economist, not a tourism operator. They employed an ex-mountain bike racer, a cross-country mountain bike racer, who had a real passionate love for her sport. They employed an outdoor instructor, so I was an outdoor instructor before I was a mountain bike racer, and a child and adolescent psychotherapist. So for many years before taking on this role, I was involved in the behaviour change aspects, trying to encourage people to be more everyday, healthy, outdoors active for our mental and our physical health. They also employed the director of the Adventure Syndicate, which is a collective of women who ride very long distances self-supported by bike, like ultimate bike adventures. And we storytell about it, and we're very public online about the real health, emotional and physical health benefits of travelling self-supported by bike. And so all of those things, it's really interesting that they employed somebody to do this role with all of those different underpinning agendas, when across this post, the Active Nation Commissioner post, ticks all the government portfolios too. So we've got, this ticks if we can get people to undertake these short journeys by foot or by bike, then this ticks the health agenda, the environmental agenda, social justice, transport, economy, tourism, it's all there. But underpinning all of that, my personal motivation is really, really important to me, that I stand to one side of government and always with this, the health and environmental benefits over above any of those other ones. And so COVID-19 has been really interesting to me, because suddenly all of these different portfolios across our government are putting their hands up and pulling in the same direction together. And active travel is at the heart of that. Cycling, suddenly, I'm sure it's the same in all of your countries, but here in Scotland, in the city of Edinburgh, People have dug their bikes out of their sheds and they have reclaimed the streets, and they have refound a love for exploring their immediate locality by bike and by foot. So effectively, COVID-19 has been an absolute disaster. Across globally, lives have been lost, and jobs have been lost, and people are very anxious and depressed. But it's done my job. In many ways, it's really promoted this idea of what it is that we value. And what we're finding that we value here in Scotland is being outdoors and everyday active, and having the physical space to do that. So, to wind back one more step, I want to describe a little bit more about me, because I think this is really important. I grew up in a really comfortable family. I'm white, I'm middle class. I grew up in a leafy suburb just outside Glasgow. I had an athletic mother as a female role model. I had access to green space, and I could travel to that green space autonomously on my little red BMX, and nobody batted an eyelid. That's how I started. That was how I got into this sport and how I progressed through all of these levels. That is what equips me for this role. I was a kid that got a lot out of being outdoors, active by their own agency. And then when I was about 14 or 15, we moved into the west end of Glasgow. So I moved from that suburb where I had access to that green space. I could travel independently and explore and grow and meet my friends and be curious on my bike. I moved from there into the city centre. And it was just at that time that I needed my autonomy. I was becoming a young woman, and I really, really needed to be able to travel independently. And this is key, because this is when I discovered a network of green corridors out of my city. So I wasn't a mountain biker, but I did have a mountain bike. And I used to take this thing for miles. Like, I used to find little, here in Scotland, we have an organisation, Sustrans, who do an incredible job of mapping off traffic-free routes out of cities and across the UK. And I got this map from a local bike shop, and I followed these routes out of the city, and I'd get a bit lost and I'd get a bit scared, and then I'd jump on a train and I'd come home. And that, when I look back, was a really formative time for me. And when I think about access to my sport, I think how lucky I was to have that resilience, to be able to do that, to be able to get on my bike. I had a bike, I had a mum that was permissive. I lived in a city where you could get out reasonably quickly and get into green space. I felt reasonably safe. I understood how public transport operated. All of these things are absolutely key when we're talking about how we're going to grow the sport of mountain biking in our new way of being. And I'll come on to that later. I think the word COVID's being bandied around way too much. We'll leave that until the end. So I've set the scene. You get the idea of my sort of personal journey, my motivation up to that point. So now I'm a young woman. I've been emancipated through the bicycle, like I'm sure many of us have, across the world. And I go down that very same route of encouraging other people, making sure that other people have access to being outdoors and everyday active. But I noticed as an outdoor instructor, as a young outdoor instructor, that not everybody had this. It was really clear to me that I was working with groups of people who, especially in mountain biking, that had their own bikes. They were usually white, they were normally from middle class backgrounds. Their parents would drive them to trail centres or drive them to outdoor spaces in order to practice our wonderful sport, and that didn't seem very fair to me. And it also felt as though the most important work that I was doing were with the kids that didn't have that. They were the ones that got the most out of being introduced to these green spaces. So I retrained as a child and adolescent psychotherapist so that I could go into these areas and work with people using bikes as a medium, but the people first. And that is also key when it comes to this role, because this role as Active Nation Commissioner in Scotland is all about behaviour change. If you're going to encourage people to move around by bike, travel actively by bike, enjoy being outdoors and physically active, you can't go into a school and stand up there and talk about active travel. You see a sea of faces just glaze over. You go in there and you talk about when you rode the Tour Divide, 3,000 miles self-supported by mountain bike, and it starts just outside your front door there on that doorstep. Imagine that road outside your school was traffic free and you could jump on your bike and you could ride yourself home. And that road that you ride home links up to another road that links up to another road that links up to another road. And before you know it, you can travel around the world too. That's the stuff that inspires, and that's the stuff that captures imaginations. And young people, I found, are my best ally in driving this agenda. They know the benefits already, and they're not already addicted to their cars. They've got nothing to gain from remaining rooted in the way that we do in our velvet ruts as adults, to being wedded to private polluting vehicles. So, what's come out of all of this for me, this crisis in Scotland? What's come out of all of this for me? The importance of place making, the importance of understanding what people need in order to be outdoors and physically active. And I am talking about particularly mountain biking, because I think mountain biking is an absolutely key way to encourage people to have fun. I think we're losing that idea. And I stand on a lot of panels, and I speak to a lot of policymakers, and I speak to a lot of people that are worried about their business going under on high streets, and they're concerned about the economy, and they're concerned about tourism, and all of these things are incredibly important. And I've so enjoyed listening to everybody talk about that stuff. But ultimately, it needs to be fair, and it needs to be accessible to everybody, and it needs to be fun. Everybody needs to understand that right now you could go outside. If you have access to a bike, you could go outside and you could change your relationship with your environment. Focusing on the fun to be had, how it makes you feel, and one step down from that, if you're not a kid, you are quite often motivated by money. And so what I'm finding is if you find those levers, the money and the feel-good factor, then the other stuff that underpins our societies, the stuff that actually we need to be writing into our policies, the things that we should be picketing our governments about social justice and about our environment, that stuff just happens. So, mountain biking is very well placed. It's I don't need to extol the benefits of it anymore. I'm on a call with 126 participants that I'm sure understand that fun, that feel-good factor, and a lot of you probably understand the social justice and environmental gains to be had from mountain biking as well. But I think there's some challenges in our industry as well that I think it's my responsibility here to highlight. I feel really strongly about this. We've not just been hit by COVID-19 lately. All of you will be aware of the Black Lives Matter movement. And I think what's been so interesting to me is that we, quite often in the outdoors, I'm not just talking about mountain biking, but in the outdoors in general, we shy away from this idea that it's not that inclusive or diverse a sport. You need a lot of money. You need to be able to travel to trail centres. You did in the past. Maybe that'll change now with green corridors out of cities that I've been really excited about hearing as the focus. A lot of people, mountain biking's got a reputation for packaging your bike up and sticking it on a plane to go and ride the French Alps. But here we have an opportunity to reclaim the grassroots of this stuff. If we can ensure that nobody gets left behind in this green recovery, if we can ensure that mountain biking is accessible to everybody, no matter what your background, you've got access to a bike, there are incentives for you riding that bike to school where someone might help you repair it so that you can find those green corridors on the weekend. That's the stuff that I think is going to make a difference. And that's the stuff that's going to capture policymakers and funders' eyes. If we can make sure that mountain biking recovers in a diverse, inclusive, sustainable way, then I think we're absolutely onto something. I also feel strongly that, I'm biased. I live in Scotland and I love Scotland, and I think we've got a great access code, and our cities are just big towns really, and we can get out of them quickly, most of us, not all of us, but most of us. And so I definitely feel there's a big groundswell around recovery from the crisis being very much in keeping with what I'm hearing across all the other keynote speakers, which is exciting. This idea of adventure travel, self-supported adventure travel, and people remaining and reconnecting with what it means to stay local, to travel locally. So travel Scotland wide. In my case, I think there's real scope for encouraging that cyclotourism, off-road cyclotourism in particular. I think this might be it's time for another step up of expansion. We need to be thinking about moving away from this idea that we need to drive out of our cities to access great trails, and that we need to fly somewhere to find new places. There's so much can happen on our doorstep, and I'm not an economy expert, I'm not a tourism expert, but if we can focus on re-injecting the money that we have in our community here in Scotland and send everybody north from the central belt, then maybe those small businesses on those high streets in the Cairngorms and in the northwest, they won't suffer quite so much as everybody is worried that they will. Yeah, I guess just one last thing about quiet streets. This placemaking agenda, I felt quite far removed from my love of mountain biking in this job, in the first year in this role. I felt like I've been standing on a lot of street corners looking at drop curbs and wondering about how all these people can travel their a range of bikes and wheelchairs and pedestrians, around city centres. And I'm not a city planner, that's not my passion, that's not my love. But what I've noticed here with the quiet streets and the resurrection of all bikes, mountain bikes, old BMXs, rusty tourers, everything, what I've noticed is there's this groundswell, and if we can just step out of our silo as passionate mountain bikers and think about inclusion across the board, think about health across the board, your walker, if you can encourage somebody to walk 2 kilometres, then maybe that next step might be to travel 4 kilometres, and then before you know it, they might have engaged a Sustrans route and bought themselves a nice new shiny mountain bike a few years down the line. I think we need to be broadening our mindset right out to include everybody.
Lee, thank you. That's brilliant. And I think we can see you described yourself what kind of person they got. I think a very personal journey at the beginning tells us what kind of person the Scottish Government got to be their coordinator. So thank you. That was excellent. Good. I'm going to invite everybody from the keynotes back on. We're a few minutes behind schedule, but we've got time for sort of 10 minutes chat. I'm sure people will not necessarily dash off instantly at the end of the show. So, and I think we have everybody back here. Just to get us started, because I have a number of questions in the chat, but perhaps if I could just do a round of the keynotes and just say maybe one thing that you heard from one of the other keynotes that made you think or made you react and go, yeah, I could use that, or that's interesting, or that's kind of important that you would reflect on. I mean, Teodora, you had the longest to listen. Did you hear something from the others that made you go, yes?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I heard many things that were really insightful to me, but I think we all agreed that adventure travel and mountain biking is the future, is going to be on the rise. And we all hope that actually the COVID-19 would present more opportunities and challenges for this, because we all want to be a little bit more sustainable. And at the moment, as we are forced to avoid overcrowding, and we're forced to really plan our holidays less but better, we are moving in the right direction. So it's very encouraging to see that. And I'm really happy that all the other panelists agreed on the same points.
Good. Thomas, your reaction?
Well, in the final notes of Lee Cragie's speech, he touched on something that I kind of shortly stated in the beginning of my speech, but it is super important that we remember to include and think wider than just average men my age mountain biking. We need to be more inclusive. We need to have a bigger diversity. And thank you, Lee, for just getting that message across. That's very important. We try to remember this within the IMBA Europe board, but that's one of the tasks we have, to make that more diverse as well. So we'll get to work as soon as possible.
Thank you. Gergana, your reaction?
Also agree that it is great to hear about harmonized and synchronized approach, also European level. And I think that also, as Teodora mentioned, turning the challenges into opportunities, now actually promoting Europe to Europeans to reinvent and to visit unknown places or places which they can explore in a different way. For example, on a bike, because you experience in a very different way a place by bike or going on a hike than in a traditional way. So it is great to see that now the current crisis is actually pressuring us to basically experience the world in a new and very likely in a more sustainable way. So great to hear this.
Good. And Lee, what did you hear before you spoke?
Yeah, I think almost everything that I spoke about had been reiterated at some point or other by the other speakers, and I was so pleased to hear just so profoundly the sustainability message coming through, where I think as mountain bikers, we are connected to nature. That is our passion for it, isn't it? That's the reason that we do this stuff. We love it, and we can sometimes get a bit lost in our own fun and enjoyment. But to hear that everyone's on board with this idea that the world has changed and we're going to have to think about sustainable ways to travel now, and that might mean actually not traveling, and that there are real economic benefits to be had by not traveling, by looking inwards and investing in our communities. That was interesting.
Good. It's interesting you're all nodding, because that was one of the questions came in the chat early on from Dom at Trashfield Trails, was talking about environmental responsibility and ecological protection in trails. So thank you for kind of picking that one off. Teodora had a specific question. Somebody said basically, are we genuinely going to change tactics in tourism? I mean, to what extent is this a reaction to COVID, or is it more deeply embedded?
We have been talking about sustainability for a very, very long time. I think that COVID would speed up a transformation which was already on the way, and that's great. I mean, we are on the promoting side. So for us, I mean, in our own operations and our members' operations, we've seen much more focus on local communities, much more focus on returning travelers, and generally speaking, less on numbers and more on value. And all these things are very much resonating with COVID. So the only difference is that now we are not talking about things that happen because maybe there is a little bit of a demand out there. We are forced. We really need to reduce the number of tourists. We really need to deal with the fact that traveling is probably on the long term going to be more expensive. So people are going to be taking less holidays, but maybe for longer. All these factors will play in and would help us for a swift recovery. And as I mentioned before, the European Commission, and we have seen this also, for example, some airlines were saved because they promised to invest heavily in sustainable fuels. I mean, this is something unprecedented. It's not exactly adventure travel related, but it is to the European tourism community. And we're seeing more and more about this. And we see that governments speak about recovery without forgetting sustainability. And we see this in tourism as well.
Thank you. A question for yourself, Thomas, but others may comment. When it actually comes to getting kind of money spent locally, what can the kind of people who are on this call from a more of a trail center, trail building kind of destination point of view do to get, to make the case for funding, for support for volunteers who are often not recognized? Is there something, maybe it applies perhaps Gergana again in adventure travel? I mean, there's a lot of NGOs and community groups that do more adventurous and associations in that world. Do either of you have a view and how kind of money might come to our kind of people, I suppose, is what I'm hearing from the question?
Well, I think that I used to work in a nature park as a nature guide and as a developer, and while developing the nature park. And one of the realizations we had within that work is when you make projects and invest heavily for tourists, you don't always benefit the locals, but when you invest heavily in the local community and give them an opportunity, then those facilities, those trails, those new ways to enjoy your local community, your local nature, your local nature parks or whatever can also be used by tourists. So I think we just need to look closer to home to get people active, get people engaged, and have them enjoy and develop their skills and their health and their fun and enjoyment more locally, and then get inspired. And like Teodora said, then save up some money and invest in that long travel. Go somewhere. Now you practiced on your mountain bike, on your local trails, that you made allies with the local community, the local municipality or so. You got the volunteers going. You're building local community, but these people at some point will be so skilled at mountain biking because they can go ride the local trails that they will invest in a journey and go maybe stay for 10 days in the Alps or in Scotland or other places. So I think that we need to look more locally, act local and think global, I guess.
Yeah. Gergana, I mean, the venture travel sector is commercial sector, but it's come out of a heritage of walking and cycling that has come out of there. Do you see a relationship with the kind of voluntary and some of these resources going to community level as well as to commercial level?
Yes, definitely. And just here, I want to mention that according to our research, adventure travel leaves about 65% of what the traveler spends in the destination. So this is a very important aspect, and this is why it is good now that governments recognize and see the potential of adventure travel, as it can help definitely the local communities and is taking into consideration the local communities. And now it's important to also mention that now more than ever is important to take into consideration the local communities' perspective about the development of any type of tourism, as if they don't feel safe and comfortable with travelers, then it will be a chaos. So definitely bringing now it's important to wherever any business is working to get its partners, volunteers, and work with them, test some new products. I think that we among each other as industry need to have more open mind and collaborate and act together and not think as competitors, but rather as collaborators, as this is the way we can bring eventually travelers and raise the visibility to a destination.
Thank you. We're going to have to let the other panelists have a go at some of these rather juicy topics. So I just kind of pass around the group, I mean, and say, you know, did we miss a question or a kind of last word on what you've heard? Lee, you didn't ask her one of those last questions, but have you got a kind of maybe a key point that you want to go back to from the last kind of 40 minutes or so?
Yeah, I suppose from an industry-wide perspective, I definitely feel like I'm on a bit of a different limb here when I'm pushing public health agenda. I think we can get very lost in this idea of encouraging travellers, encouraging tourism, boosting economy. And somebody asked a really good question, you know, how do we encourage more money into our trail centres? You do it by being inclusive. You do it by having a look around and seeing who's not there and why they're not there, and not just accept the fact that because they're not there, they don't exist. There are people that want to use those trails, they don't have the money to use those trails, they don't own a bike, that can't get there because they don't have a car. Let's not, I know we're industry focused and I know that we need to be thinking about the economy, but that's part of a thriving economy, is a healthy community, a diverse community.
Thank you. Teodora, last thought.
I would keep from this session the social without crowding and all the secret things it has to all of us. I hope we're going to have a social without crowding summer in the green parts of Europe.
Thank you. Thomas.
Well, being from a very small Scandinavian country, which is the flattest one of all the Scandinavian countries, we have been working for the last 10, 15 years to try to actually, before we even talked about the concepts of trails close to home, trails that kids and anybody can reach from their doorstep. We actually almost achieved that in Denmark by now, and it is changing how people interact with their local nature. It's changing how they see their local nature and how they use it, because in Denmark, we're getting close to a vision where there can be no more than 40 kilometers between trails, mountain bike trails. So all of a sudden, everybody in some respect within a short matter of kilometers can reach a local trail, ride their mountain bike and ride back home, take a shower. And this is taking the whole car thing out of it. And it's also that all these trails are being built and established within the local community with volunteer work and so on. So it becomes something else than a mountain bike trail. It becomes a community project. And this is something that I see locally and every day in Denmark. And this is why I'm so passionate about the trails close to home idea throughout Europe. Can we get more local trails that people can reach without taking their car? We will benefit many, many levels of community.
Thanks. Gergana, the last word on this keynote panel.
Very exciting to hear these numbers and this data from Denmark, and I'm looking forward to spreading the word globally about this, as the Nordics are definitely an example for the whole entire globe. So just excited to hear that cycling and active tourism, definitely more and more people see it as the opportunity for recovery. So looking forward to that and contributing to this.
Thank you. Well, in the German tradition, I would call for a round of applause to our keynotes. And I don't know how one does, but I still haven't worked out virtual rounds of applause. But I really appreciate it. Lee, Thomas, Teodora, Gergana, thank you very much. And thanks very much for your kind of support for this session. We will take a momentary reshuffle while we bring up the next session, which is a discussion panel. And we are currently on my clock about 10 minutes late on the schedule. So if you need that sort of after this meeting, or we're holding you back from your bike ride, I do hope that you will stay on to hear our really interesting group of panelists come and have a further discussion on this subject. And I think bring in a very different kind of mix. My old friend Randy Neufeld, director from the SRAM Cycling Fund. It says SRAM, so you think, yes, he's from the bike industry, but Randy is also a lifelong activist for sustainable mobility and for the commitment and the growth of cycling in all its forms. I think, interestingly, bringing a very different dimension is Thomas Egger, director of the Swiss Center for Mountain Regions. I mean, Thomas is at the heart not only of a region, but also that combination of politics and policy and alliances and groups in his work, to try and build tourism and sustainability and other factors into his community. Luca D'Angelo, I think, is well known to many people in the IMBA community, but from Dolomiti Paganella Tourism. Luca has been one of the kind of driving forces trying to get destination built and incorporating mountain biking into that idea of a destination and tourism and branding and the vision, and is a real expert in developing that kind of identity for a region, and mountain biking plays a part of that. And Mike, president of the Network of Outdoor Sports, he's been involved with us in various projects. He's working on the benefits of outdoor sport for society. So I think crossing some of the things that Lee in particular was saying earlier into the value of sport and outdoor activity and recreation, and bringing that all together. So a really interesting and diverse panel, I hope, with kind of destinations and policy and sports in their different ways of approaching. So welcome all, and I think your microphones are going to get turned on and we can see your smiling faces. Luca, I think you've just reopened, and I think your area has just reopened, and you've probably had it as tough as anyone. you want to give us a kind of immediate reaction about what's going on in your space and what you're seeing on the ground?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everybody. It's a real pleasure for me to share what we have done and what we will do for the next future. Yeah, as you were just saying, we actually opened our bike area on the 6th of June. We were kind of the first, together with Kronplatz in Südtirol and with Lenzerheide, opening in the Alps. We usually open really early in our area because we have different zones, basically. We were supposed to open the 11th of April in Morvenes, one of our areas, but due to COVID, unfortunately, we need to postpone this opening. And we had a really tough job this year, working on the mountains, working on the trails. There'd been a lot of, was kind of disaster of boots after a lot of snowing in the winter. And we were a little bit late, but the work that our trail building crew have done has been really amazing, I have to say. And also the support from the lift companies has been great. So we basically opened the 6th of June with 70% of our trail capacity. We're still reopening some trails. First weekend was okay. The weather was not so okay. As an Italian, you don't really get affected by weather. And so if it's not sunshine 100%, you say, oh, I might not go riding. Something we have to definitely work as Italians, Italian riders, basically. And so the first weekend was nice. We had the chance to set up all the procedure with COVID. Of course, we are following rules coming from the national government, also by our local government. We have produced sort of a lot of signs, just to give you an idea. This is something we have produced. And it was not the first weekend, not so crowded. Basically, was really important to set up, to see what was working, what was not really working. We don't need to follow so many rules, basically. The most important are using the mask if you can keep 1 meter away, if you're queuing, especially inside the lift. You need to wear a mask inside the cable car. You need to wear a mask on the chairlift as well, if it's open air. But you don't need to wear a mask if you're riding. That's the most important part. And the cable car can lift 2/3 of the capacity. Okay, so we reduce basically part of capacity, no reducing on chairlift. And we have blocked all the windows in the cable cars as well to make air coming through. So we tested basically this first adoption, this first procedure on the first weekend. And we had around 200 bikers on Saturday, and I think 30 on Sunday, but it was really pouring rain, really, really hard. Last weekend was the real kickoff for us, I have to say. And on Saturday, we experienced a boom. We're actually expecting this kind of boom. I can tell you that we host around 1,200 people in one day. So we had to manage kind of queue. And the queue now are really long because people have to be distanced a little bit, so they look massive. But in a normal day, in a normal, I don't know, 2019 day, you wouldn't see this kind of queue because people, they can stay much closer to each other. But we had no, basically any complaints from riders, from bikers. Everybody wants really to get back into trails, to experience, even to share a chat once you're queuing. So it was not so tough, I have to say. And we had a lot of collaboration from riders as well, following the rules. We create on our website this section called Ride Responsibly, because of course we can't just say you have to do this, you have to do this, or you don't have to do this. We asking for a responsible way to riding and to follow procedure. This procedure, they might be changing in the next couple of weeks or month if of course the pandemic it will go better. But yeah, it was really nice to see
really good to hear.
Riders.
That's really good to hear. Thank you.
Yeah.
Let me throw that success across to Thomas. I mean, you've not only been involved in this recovery, Thomas, but there is the challenge in any mountain region of changing climate, changing tourism patterns. So when you look at the sort of Swiss regional and your region's recovery from COVID, but also the kind of longer term, what are you looking at for the kind of post-COVID period in your region?
Well, thanks, Kevin, and hello to everybody. I think COVID struck us very heavily, you see the situation in Switzerland was very difficult before already. We were just recovering from another shock, which was the euro shock. We had the exchange rate in 2015, which really put us into a really very difficult situation. We lost most of European clients. So we tried to diversify with outside European clients, with Arab countries, Far East, etc. And all of those have now gone. So what we really try to do this year is to recover with our own Swiss citizens. And so all of our marketing organizations, foremost of them, myswitzerland.com, have all made campaigns, and we are now competing for every destination to get our Swiss citizens back to the mountains. And I think this is really a chance also for us. As it was said before, this crisis can really be a chance to make our people rediscover mountains and to reinstall a sort of a sustainable tourism. So forget about this idea of flying for 50 euros to Mallorca, etc., but really stay in our mountains. This is really the chance. And there I see really mountain biking as one of the major topics. And as you mentioned, resilience is one of the keywords. We have also the climate change, which is affecting us a lot. So our goal must be to diversify the tourism offer. We were strongly relying in the past on winter tourism. Now what we try to do is to develop much more summer, but I insist we also have to develop spring and autumn as own seasons. And there we have a lot to play, and mountain biking is the key for this. So we really have a card to play, and I see the crisis finally as a chance for our regions.
Thank you. Mike, do you want to react to that? I mean, you're representing the kind of outdoor sports movement. You're looking at benefits to society. You're looking at you've done the work on some of the work on the economics. What's your reaction from the two destination managers saying, you know, what's happening and what they need?
Yes, so just to give folk a little bit of background, I'm involved in the European Network of Outdoor Sports, and ENOS was created really because the European Commission Sport Unit was very focused on traditional sports, and a number of us felt that the outdoor sports sector was underrepresented, particularly with the European Commission. So our ethos is about working together to promote outdoor sports at a European level. I mean, it's great to see the outdoors reopening again and the enthusiasm for it. One of the things that has struck us throughout this pandemic is the clear latent demand that there is for access to nature, access to the outdoors. And that's been brought out in a number of pieces of research across Europe, and including research we had done previously on the benefits of outdoor sports. So that latent demand will need to be satisfied over the coming months and years. And I think that mountain biking and outdoor sports in general provides a real opportunity for low impact, low cost, and low risk opportunities for improving health and well-being and economic return. One of the things that's really interesting about the outdoor sector is, in terms of the economics, it is a very powerful sector in terms of developing a local economy, because most outdoor providers reinvest their profits back into equipment, into coaching, into facilities, and that reinvestment creates further opportunities for economic driving. And it's not that people make high profits, individuals make high profits in the sector, but actually that reinvestment creates greater opportunity and greater spread of the economic benefit within a community. So these are really powerful drivers, and we need to reinforce that message at a European level.
Thank you. Speaking of one of the organizations, I would say now it's a company that wants to spread some of those economic benefits its way, Randy. What's the kind of bike industry take at the moment on the kind of mountain biking segment and this kind of sense of recovery? I think you're muted. No, we're not hearing you. Oh, I'm not. No, can anybody help from the production side? No. We'll pause there. Tech will leap in and try and fix things, Randy, for a moment while we go around a couple of questions. I mean, bouncing off the three of you, there's a sense of kind of needing to do some, perhaps, you know, getting people into this new space, getting into local as a starting point, getting into community. Is international tourism and travel to destinations going to end up being a competitor? Or is it a write-off? Do you just not think about it, attracting international tourists and international outdoor sports enthusiasts at the moment? Are we relying on local, and for how long?
We're starting.
Please, Luca, give it a...
Okay. But I mean, in a normal year, I would say making 100 number of bikers that we have, I would say 65% are Italians. So mainly are locals, mainly are from the local region as well. And the others comes basically mostly from Germany, Austria, and Switzerland as well. And but this year we're pushing a lot also in our communication strategy, mostly on Italians and locals, because we believe there is much space. The government has made a lot of investment in even for private to buy new bicycle, and it's really hard to find a bicycle right now. So we're expecting even new people to come. That's why also new facilities, new trade, even really easy trades or trade center or pump track can help people to start to join basically the community of biking. We are expecting basically a return from Germany mainly. I would say in September, October, and also like late October would be really important for us to basically recover a little bit from the part of the season we have lost. That will be spring, and so I think we might be pushing the communication mainly on Germany and Austria and Switzerland as well during that period, because that actually that's the best time to ride it. The scenery is unbelievable. The Dolomites, just this is fake, but it's real, and it looks unbelievable. The colors, the lake, and so that's the right time to ride. And we've been already invested a lot with the lift company as well, and with hoteliers. You have to think that usually this destination 4 or 5 years ago, basically, when we didn't have so many bikers, when the bike product was not so important, we used to close, I would say, around half of September. So the summer season was already important, but not so important like now. We're really trying to push the shoulder season. I even don't like it too much to call like that, but spring and September, October, during big month in summer, we're already quite crowded. So we are not pushing promotion during this time.
Correct.
We don't want to go over.
I'll just check back before I ask the others. Randy, I saw something connect just then. Are you with us?
No.
Nope, appears not. It's a long way from Chicago. This I think the electrons are getting tired with all these video conferences, and they're finding Chicago a long way off. Mike, are we re-steering outdoor activities and outdoor sports to be local in the short term, or are you seeing a different story?
Yeah, I think we produced a manifesto for outdoor sports in general as part of ENOS, and one of the things was saying, let's promote opportunities, participate at a local level in the short to medium term while this pandemic occurs and as we emerge out of it. I think the international thing will come back, but there's a massive untapped market at a local level, at a national level, of the people who, as Lee pointed out, we're discovering cycling, walking, running, that maybe hadn't done it much before. And that untapped market is something that we could develop for local communities, for national trail centers. And I think there are huge opportunities there that you know, makes the whole process very sustainable and also very manageable, because one of the things that, you know, we're aware of is that as travel starts to happen again, there needs to be confidence within local communities that they can actually handle and manage the travelers coming in. And that was alluded to earlier about the whole value sets that are going to be critical as part of this.
Okay. Don't forget, audience, that you can also chip in on the chat to give us, or the Q&A, to give us any questions yourselves. But Thomas, I mean, I am seeing some spectacular figures in Switzerland for the growth in kind of road cycling and transportation cycling. I mean, if you're the one who said, yeah, we need Swiss people to come to the countryside, to our mountains, this kind of stuff. is it an urban boom, or do you see there are genuine new entrants that will try this other kind of cycling? Because I guess, you know, Switzerland gives a perception of being, your mountains are impressive. Are we going to get people at the entry level in your direction?
We are getting all people on the cycle now, and that's the good news, because people in the urban area, they have now changed their mode of transportation. They are not anymore willing to go on tramways, etc., in public transport because of the crisis, of the sanitary situation. So they bought a lot of cycles, and I think we have the same situation as in every other country. We don't get any cycles anymore. So you have to wait for 3 months now to get your cycle, and that's not a good situation. So the industry could really help us here, just to say. And then the other side is, of course, also the tourism. We had an enormous boost in the demand on mountain biking in the last years, and more so now with all the e-bikes. It's enormous as we see those e-bikes develop. This is a huge chance to attract new people, not only because of the COVID crisis, but really new people who would not be cycling on the other side. But this also creates us more conflicts. We do not have to hide about this aspect, because our ways, our paths, our cycling trails, they are mostly hiking trails. And so we will see a lot of crises, of conflicts also during this summer, and we have to resolve them. And the good news now from the policy side is that we voted 2 years ago an article in our constitution who says that we have to take care of these cycling paths. This is now a federal obligation, and all the cantons and municipalities have an obligation to do a planning of these cycling paths within the next 5 years, so that you can really solve this conflict, these potential conflicts. And that's really also a good sign from the policy side.
Great news. I keep looking up to my screen where there's a little panel of your faces, and I'm just wondering whether Randy is with us now or still locked out. You wave your hand. No, probably not. Conflict's an interesting one. I mean, we've heard from some of the community level, and we've heard from some of the groups that it's almost an oddity, because some of the mountain biking world is kind of bumping into a lot of new people in spaces where they were riding, possibly because they're not traveling as much, and even they are finding things a bit crowded. And I'm curious how we have this reaction that we're a bit crowded, and then our tourism colleagues earlier on are talking about a collapse in, you don't have to sit on an airplane, you can't be on a cruise ship, you kind of maybe coach tours are in trouble. Does the mountain biking world worry too much, or does outdoor sports worry too much about this perceived congestion? Maybe Mike, you have a view for starters.
Yeah, I think natural spaces have the capacity to absorb huge numbers of people very effectively, but it's where they are condensed is one of the challenges, and particularly at sort of hotspots. And I think I liked what Thomas was talking about earlier on in the Danish model by up more spaces and more facilities, particularly at a local level. That helps to alleviate those honeyspot sites becoming overcrowded. And I mean, I live in Northern Ireland, and here we have 3 or 4 really hotspot mountain biking trail sites, and they can get hugely busy at weekends. And yet other places are fairly deserted. We have vast areas of forest land that there's nobody in, and there are opportunities. So I guess one of the things that I would be keen on is creating the infrastructure at a more diverse level across Europe. The other thing that I think we haven't really touched on is about conflict with other forms of environmental use. So that's the nature itself, and certainly within ENOS, we work very closely with our colleagues in Europark, which represents the protected area network, and we've produced 10 principles of good practice to try and reduce conflict between the natural environment and the bikers and all sorts of other outdoor sports. And I think one of the things, I mean, my background personally is environmental science and environmental education with young people. And I'm pretty passionate about sustainability, but I think we talk a lot about sustainability, but maybe we need to go beyond that and talk about restoration. And there are opportunities for trail builders and for those who are involved in that sort of thing to actually improve habitats rather than just put a trail through a habitat by actually planting native trees, by by scattering wildflower seeds on the periphery of any trails that are built. So there are great opportunities, but we need to seize those and actually drive forward policies for those as well.
Luca, do you see this? I mean, as a destination manager, a regional manager, do you carry that fear of this idea of mountain biking is too much and, you know, we're on the congested end, or is it overstated? I mean, relative to other forms of tourism or other opportunities?
Probably, like if we compare like the ski tourism with far away, I mean, it's another world in terms of numbers. But again, what Mike was saying, it was really interesting. Being a sort of hotspot, because our area is not huge, it's quite condensed basically. And what we have done and what we have seen it works is basically designing a master plan. When you need also to design new trails, you need to avoid everybody starting, oh, I want to do a flow trail here, I want to do a technical trail, because everybody wants their own trail. You need to have like a wider perspective, because if you design the destination in order to manage flow, you can also manage like crowded, you can also spread people, you can offer different kind of trails in different areas, not all like technical trails in one area, one easy trails in one area, etc. So that's basically what we have tried to do with our community, also with the local municipality and the Forest Commission. And talking about congestion and also conflict, of course, as living in a mountain in the Alps, basically, a lot of the trails that we're using used to be hiking trails. Some of them were not really used, some of them were not really maintained. So when we started our project, we actually start to maintain this kind of trails. And we see that, we saw that during the time that now even hikers are going back to their trails because they are well maintained. And of course, we push a lot, and if somebody of you knows about destination, you probably know that we are working a lot in terms of culture, in terms of spreading this way to ride responsibly or to even hike responsibly, because we have some funny problems also with hikers going into specific bike trails. You need to communicate a lot about that. It's not just follow bikers, hikers. You need to have a wide perspective.
Yeah. Thomas, there was a big excited flurry on the Q&A when you mentioned the idea of a kind of legal obligation to maintain, I think you said tracks, and you might have meant cycle tracks, but people think there was a legal obligation to maintain mountain bike tracks. Could you qualify? And if it is mountain bike tracks, you've got a queue of people who want to know about it afterwards.
Good, so good to have risen this topic. No, it's both. It's for leisure and for daily commuting. So the cantons and municipalities with this new federal obligation, the constitution, have the obligation to plan their cycling paths as well for commuting, daily commuting in the urban areas as well as outside. And this is very important also to resolve the conflict that we were speaking of before. Really to see where is priority given on hiking, for instance, where is priority given on biking, and where is coexistence. So there is really an obligation, and I feel this is a very good, important tool now where we have a strong opportunity to deal with this topic.
Great, thank you. I'm going to have one more go because we're not near the end of our time to see whether Randy made it in with sound.
Can you hear me?
Hooray! Welcome.
I don't know what was going on. The conversation has moved well beyond what I was going to say initially, into the exciting world of conflicts with other user groups. But let me just quickly say, when COVID hit, the bike industry was predicting disaster because it hit right in the springtime, our highest season, and it has changed out. It has changed to be very different than what we expected. It was a surprise. We've seen a soaring of sales of bikes over, soaring of bikes under €1,000. It's been much less on bikes lower than €1,000. But the demand of lower end bikes has been very surprising because of our doomsday predictions, because of a disruption in the supply chain. Now we're having a lot of trouble readjusting and getting out there again. maybe one of the biggest things that happened is that events stopped happening. And events are a huge driver of sales. People want to do a ride or a race, and they go out and buy a new mountain bike to do it. That's the only way to get a better time if you haven't trained. And so we see that kind of disruption. But I think we are, seeing a rebound. There's pent-up demand for those events, and that's seeing a rebound. I think there's still a lot of cautiousness because of the economic impacts, particularly for the high end of the bike market, what exactly is going to happen there, but really see a return to normal in the spring. And finally, to connect more with the more recent discussion on this call or on this webinar, I think that there's the issue of how do we use this as an opportunity to grow mountain biking? And I think the main lesson is the issue of diversity. Our ability to get more trail access, our ability to have more trails close to home is really dependent on having a wider constituency, a wider group of people having access and participating in mountain biking. And so all the new interest because of COVID, that should be precious to us, and we should be looking at the development of trails and the offerings of what we have with particular focus on those new riders because they are the future of the sport.
Randy, thank you very much. I'm conscious of people's time. We have many of these webinars and seminars. This may be the first of its kind on mountain biking in Europe. I think we probably will do it again in the sense that there's a demand. But I'd just like to give, before I say a few closing words, each of this particular panel group kind of one word. And I'll do the same as I did for the keynotes, just to say, you've listened for an hour and a half, pick out one thing you're going to take away that you think, yes, I need to take that away and think about it or do something about it when after this seminar. Luca, a last word.
Yeah, actually, I would take the last word from Randy, and because this is really part of our strategy as well. Making mountain biking more inclusive, spreading even to kids, people that's starting. We have a more gravity approach, of course, in our mountain biking, but a lot of people, they don't even know what it is. They're just thinking it's a crazy sport for crazy people with full face helmets. This is something we need to change because, of course, there is part of our sport, but it's not all. And so in making more inclusive, building new infrastructure, building new trails, new easy trails also, working along with our mountain bike guides, it will be part of our strategy. So making the differentiation, the diversity, the inclusivity, it will be, I think, the key goal.
Thank you. Thomas.
Yes, the message to be taken home that I understood for me is really to change the tourism model much more than we thought before towards sustainability. So really changing this model of flying everywhere around the world and looking more close to home. This is for me the key message for today.
Thank you. Mike.
Yeah, I think that whole diversity thing and encouraging greater levels of participation for all in our communities is a critical message. I mean, one of the things that hasn't been touched on a lot at the seminar is actually the massive benefits that people get in terms of mental health and well-being, which is going to be such a big issue coming out of COVID, that people will need that sort of mental boost. And mountain biking, amongst many other outdoor sports, can provide that, and it can provide it for all. And I think that's a really important message.
I think I'll definitely share that one, Mike. It's very personal to me, especially. Randy, last thought.
How unique and special mountain biking is. What is special about mountain biking in order to be able to attract diverse and new people to adventure in nature? What is special about mountain biking to bring new riders into cycling? What is special about mountain biking that can help tourism recover? What's the special contributions that mountain biking can make to the COVID recovery?
Thank you very much. And thank you again, and a kind of digital round of applause to our panelists, I'm sure, from everybody listening. It's really just left to me to say a few closing words of thanks and kind of observations. Firstly, thank you to this earlier keynotes. Thank you to this panel. I mean it quite genuinely. We had a list of the people and the kind of profiles we wanted for this event, and you responded. And I hope our audience sees that IMBA Europe is a place where leaders can meet, sector leaders, tourism leaders, outdoor leaders, and leading thinkers can meet. And I do hope this is not just the first time that we do this. So of course to you for giving up your time and also sharing what you do in this space. Secondly, can I thank our colleagues at Green TV for the media control and the production. You've been entirely professional, and I know you've done a few of this with us now in the cycling world now. It's hugely appreciated that you're able to do that. And lastly, I think I would say to the IMBA members and community and the people that support us in our kind of trial leader networks and corporate supporters and things, thank you. IMBA Europe is a relatively small entity, and it operates because we have great networks and great partnerships and great allies. We have a huge vision, as Thomas describes it, and we think we have a huge contribution. That is only going to work if this family gets bigger and if this family travels together on this path, both of recovery. And let's, I think my own personal take on this would be, you know, people will tell us, don't forget, Corona is a horrible, horrible bump on the road, a bump on the trail. But climate change, obesity, biodiversity, somebody mentioned mental health, Mike, I think other things, they've been with us a long time. Maybe Corona does wake us up, but if we can learn, even from sessions like this, what our contribution is to any of those challenges, I suppose COVID is a chance, horribly, to practice. It's a chance to practice the skill set of lobbying, the skill set of diversity, the skill set of storytelling, and of building alliances. And I think we, the IMBA board and our colleagues and our members, we really, really feel we're on that journey. And I hope today, those who've discovered IMBA Europe for the first time will stay in touch and will want to be part of the community that kind of delivers this for the whole of Europe. And for those bikers, I think Thomas said, those people that have bought a bike recently, we can help decide whether they become mountain bikers and whether they stay mountain bikers. And I think that's at a human level, that's a very, very precious thing. And I'm delighted to have shared that with all of you. And enjoy your riding, stay safe, stay healthy. And I really, really hope with you, for that's your living and it's your hobby, that you are able to recover, and that your interests in the sport, pastime, leisure activity and business and mountain biking is strengthened as we come out of this process. So have a good afternoon.